Welcome to the Point of Convergence podcast. I am your host, Grant Lira. Get ready to sit down, tune in, and implement. Remember, the knowledge you learn here and anywhere else in your life is only worth something to you if you use it. So get implementing after this episode and enjoy. Welcome back to another episode of Point of Convergence. Today, we are joined by Jonathan Macdonald of Some Talented People. And John and me have had a few conversations before, one of my good friends now, and I'll let him introduce himself and kind of take the floor here for a little bit.
Okay, so Grant, thank you very much for this. I know we missed a potential recording which turned up at midnight on my calendar, so I don't know what calendars are doing these days. I'm speaking here to your followers today. I'm trying to achieve something which is in many ways ridiculously ambitious, but at the same time I think necessary. Which is Potency.world. So anyone who's on LinkedIn can find that business page, and as we talk through today, I'll sort of explain more about that. But this is the latest iteration of trying to change the world. So there's backstory we can have before that.
Well, there we go. So I guess let's get into that because I'm curious, about exactly kind of how that all started, Some Talented People, Potency.world. Like, let's talk a little bit about both of those things and kind of how you came into that light.
Okay, so a little bit of a summary of my life story. Now, I'm going to say a whole load of things which happened to me, but they didn't all happen at the same time, and each one gave me opportunities to learn, and I'm clearly still alive. So people shouldn't be too concerned about this. So it turns out that things that influenced my life began with the first 9 months of my existence. I'm the product of an extramarital affair. My birth mother is Nigerian, was forced to marry at 19, gave birth to me at 20, and was threatened to be left in London with no support if she didn't give me up for adoption. So day two, I get put into a children's home, and I don't get adopted till month 9. Now, for years, my mum and dad would say, especially my mum and my auntie, so not my birth, but my mum and dad who raised me, would say to me, I was a very good runner at primary school, and they go, "Oh, you're such a brilliant runner. Your legs were like jelly when we got you home from the nursery or from the orphanage or wherever it was, children's home." And for years and years and years, I just went, well, yeah, baby's legs are like jelly, but they are week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But after a while, they're crawling around, they're getting picked up, they're getting bobbed, they're in their bouncy bobber things, their legs build up to a point where at 9 months, they're trying to clamber around things in a way that you're quite concerned as a parent. So it turns out that for the first year after I was adopted, my legs didn't work. I had to have specialist physiotherapy and work as if you're regaining from an injury. Your muscles are wasted, so mine never developed. Now, I don't remember that. I don't feel traumatized by it, but in researching a book I wrote, I typed in sensory deprivation in babies, and literally every single part of the behaviors they say for children that are not bonded with, I have. Addictive personality, obsessive personality. I am the sort of person who has all his jars turned around of his soups. I'm the sort of person that, I've got a Hoover today because it's my cleaning day, but you could lick my floors and be safe, because what I discovered, I suppose, Tony Robbins has these 6 human needs, and one of them is certainty. So if we don't know we're going to be alive tomorrow, we're not going to put any effort into doing anything on a very basic level. But so I would say that I'm a control enthusiast. So I became much, much more about controlling myself through injury, which I'll tell you about later. But the way I clean my flat, for example, is something that I do as a process with complete certainty. the time I go to bed is always the same, so that I get complete certainty. Now, there are reasons why I do that, which we'll come to, but I go to the gym every morning. I'm there at 6:30 well, I'm actually there at 6:20 to do a stretch before they open the doors and I'm in. I always get up, make my bed, have my breakfast. So I'm doing all these things in a very systematic fashion because it gives me certainty and it also produces what I need neurologically speaking. So, little bit of mild neglect. I wasn't hurt, but I did wear nappies until I was about 5. And basically, I don't like people touching me. I don't mind a sort of hand on the shoulder or hug, but I'm very much so. This thing I wear, I call a vampire repellent. It actually stops. It's not to stop people coming in. I was wearing it when I was coaching children in school because it's a, it's a look. I'm certainly giving off a look, but I wear it because at the same time it stops people going in and grabbing hold of me. So these sort of things, a bit hypersensitive. These are the things that come from that. But the neurological outcomes seem to have slipped into a different kind of balance. And I'll explain that in context when we get to anything worthwhile. So, in brief, I basically injury free until I was 20. Then when I was 21, I banged down the doors to get this job that was paying a large amount of money so I could buy a motorcycle because my friends were motorcyclists as well. I had 2 Honda VFRs, which are sports touring bikes, and I went through France and Spain. I just set off with a couple of pinions and just drove on my own. Ironically, I didn't find out about earplugs until later. Inside the crash helmet, it's like really loud. But anyway, fun times, but very much individual. So I have never sought company ultimately. But the thing is, I'm really enthusiastic. So I am able to create change, but I realized that what I'd been doing was trying to impose my version of what I thought was good on other people. And it literally is only in the last 4 years that I found out what the difference is, but we'll get to that. So, had the motorcycle, bought this really fast sports bike. Then in 1996, I had an accident and my upper right body is completely paralyzed, spinal cord injury. I died when I hit the car, bang, because it pulled out of a side road. Then my arm apparently snaps in two. So the arm went in through the car window, snapped in two, punched a hole in the rear window. Meanwhile, my body's tipping over the car. I ended up 20 meters down the road, and I was lucky because the car following was a paramedic, and he gave me CPR until the ambulance and fire crew arrived. I become conscious again. I look over, and the first thing I see is thousands of bits of bike on the road. I'm like, oh, fucking hell, my bike. And then what I don't know is that my artery in my arm is severed and it's pumping up. So if you sever an artery 10 foot in the air, 12 foot in the air, so I'm basically losing all my blood. But I'm conscious enough for about 90 seconds, 2 minutes, to give my mum and dad's telephone number, and I was off to see a girl, my girlfriend at the time's telephone number, and then apparently I died again. They use, those defibrillators.
Yeah.
So in hospitals, they put a plastic sheet between you and it. The reason they do that is because when they're just trying to save you at the roadside, it burnt 2 big rings in my chest hair. And I didn't become conscious again until I was going over a speed hump at the entrance to the hospital they took me to. So died twice straight away. And then essentially, if you've ever had toothache, which you've all had, that's nerve pain. So that's one nerve in your tooth exposed to the air. Every single nerve that operates, sensory nerve, functional nerve on my upper right side, my phrenic nerve, my lung, my back, my shoulder, is severed in the spinal column because it's pulled out by the impact speed, pulls it out, so they can't reattach them. So 26 years later, I'm sitting here. It is so painful that when I'm not talking, I'm holding it back because it's getting towards the end of my day, but it's incredibly painful. And as a result of that, for the first 6 years after that accident, not only was I taking vast amounts of medication, prescribed medication, but I was doing vast amounts of alcohol and we'll call them recreational drugs, but it was, I was looking for oblivion. When you experience pain so significant, so we talked about, obviously you in the reserves and I've done the Army Cadets, so internal representations of pain are like explosions or volcanoes or the Death Star blowing up, that kind of thing. So I was in so much pain that I just wanted to be anywhere but here. Now, it turns out you got to be quite brave to commit suicide because despite wanting to die, I couldn't do it myself. But what I did, and this is one of the behaviors of children that don't bond, is I was doing incredibly fucking reckless things. So imagine a pile of cocaine. Yeah, like just not like a little bag that you get, but a fucking block. So I'd have that, chop it down, 2 massive lines before I drove from my house 75 miles around a motorway to work. And while I was driving, I was smoking 3 or 4 joints. Then I'd be at work in a mid-management job. I was working for Yellow Pages at the time, and I'm in a mid-management role, company car, all that sort of shit, blah, blah, blah. And I'm training new delegates whilst on ecstasy. And that's how I was. And I don't know what I must have looked like, because once I stopped taking the drugs and I saw people that were on the drugs, I went, fucking hell, that you look really bad. But anyway, I was carrying on, and at that time, so the opioid epidemic in America. So now you can't get morphine. In the UK, someone I knew just died from stage 4 bowel cancer. They were giving him 20 milligrams for him to sleep. In 1996, between 96 and 2002, I was on, so I had various products before I got to morphine, but I had these 2 tablets called Oramorph. The pink tablets were 750 milligrams, and the blue tablets were 1,250 milligrams. I was eating a strip of the pink ones during the day, and then I was trying to think, I count this out the other day. I think it's 10 to a strip. It might have been 12, but basically half a strip of the blue ones to get to sleep, and I'd sleep for maybe 3 hours, and then the pain will wake me the fuck back up again. So then I'd take another dose and get another couple of hours. That amount of morphine means that I was vomiting, projectile vomit, every day. Also, because the muscle for my lung didn't work, the lung pressed on the stomach, so I was anything I took in, projectile vomited out. Why it didn't do anything to help me lose weight, the irony is not lost on me, because I could do with losing at least a couple of stone. But anyway, yeah, and I was in a management position, and you're graded and inspected based on your interpersonal skills. All of the softer qualities are what you're gauged in your annual appraisal. So I don't know how I got away with being that fucked, but I got through appraisals perfectly happily. But every Friday, I'd start going into this deep depression about, oh, we're all going to die and the world's ending and fucking, whilst with this friend of mine taking loads of drugs. And, I mean, it's just horrific. So I'd go out, not like a DUI, like you've come from a party and you're still over the limit. Like a DUI, like you go out drinking. Drug driving, where it wasn't you had some drugs and then you went out. We went out we'd buy 100 ecstasy tablets between us, which made them £1 each. And there was three of us at the time, drive around in my car at high speeds without a seatbelt, pumping music, fucking just fucked. Now, the only reason we didn't crash, and the reason I realized that drugs aren't the answer, is because even with that amount of being fucked, so speed, amphetamine, I used to buy an ounce of speed, mix it into a pint of orange juice, and drink it in one go, and I'd be sitting there going, but the pain was still there. And ultimately, when you realize that you can't get away from it, it's easier then to go, I have to find a different way. And I was lucky because the hospital that I was seen at was it's called the Royal National Orthopaedic, and it's the European Centre of Excellence for orthopedic surgeries, nerve surgeries, cancers, that sort of stuff. And I'm sitting in the orthotics department of that one day, and they go, volunteers wanted for the hospital radio, which is a radio show. Most hospitals in London have them, and they're a group of volunteers that go up, see the patients because it's quite lonely in hospital, take a request of them, play it on the radio, provide free entertainment. And this is back in the days, so nothing digital, very analog. The beds they had like a speaker at one end of the wall, an air tube, like the old headphones for airlines, and it's just the air tube and you plugged it on, that kind of system. So I was doing that. I was just doing general volunteering, and then I joined up with a guy called Graham who did the adolescent ward. So between, I'm going to say between 4 and 18. So specialist orthopedic hospital. So you've got children in there with cancers. You've got children in there having limbs removed. You've got children in there with scoliosis, a bent back. Have you ever heard of scoliosis before?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So they operate on them and they strap them into these really tight boards to straighten their back. So kids that are having a terrible time, and for their parents, it must be the most horrific thing in the world. But the kids don't have the frame of reference to understand why it's bad. And so all they want to do is be kids and have fun. But what I discovered is that the volunteers, so Graham, who's the guy, he'd been, at the time I was 24, he'd been doing this radio show at this hospital for the entire time I've been alive at the point I joined.
Wow.
And he'd go up to the wards, and we used to have a joke because I call him Graham, the housewife's choice Rich, because he'd talk to the parents, the mothers, and he was very popular because the kids liked him. He was a teacher. He is a teacher, and so that was what he did. But no one would speak to the children. Like, so you go to a bed, and if you go to the parent, oh yeah, it's like, what? Who are you trying to do this for? So. Yes. Essentially, I followed him for about 3 weeks, and then, as I want to do, I gradually started taking over. And basically, here's what I've discovered. A lot of people do a lot of things, and they measure entirely the wrong set of parameters. They don't really know how effective something is. So this is pre-digital. They've got these earphones, and so you don't know if the people you've just spoken to in the ward are listening. They might have had visitors come, they might have a doctor come, there's any number of reasons they won't be listening. And I thought, well, that's no good. You need to measure a way that they are interacting or not, or else all the work you do is a waste of time. So the typical way of doing it, and I've been in 4 hospital radios, the typical way it's done is you go up to the ward half an hour before you're going to go on air, you get the song, you go, we're going to be on in half an hour, and listen up. What I did was I went to the ward 2 hours before the show, and with my team, I do 3 circuits of the ward. So the first time around, I go, hi, how you doing? I'm Jonathan. Have you listened to the hospital radio while you've been here? And they're going to go, no. And I go, oh, you have not lived. Tune in the hospital radio, give them the headphones. Blah, blah, blah. I go, right, yeah. And I go round, and as I went round, talking to all the kids, getting them aware of the radio. Then I'd go round and I'd have a bag of, well, I don't know what the sweets would be called in your country, but like Maltesers, for example, and jelly babies. That probably transfers, and I go to them. So, which do you prefer, Maltesers or jelly babies? Hold the sweets out. And they go, because you see that is it's called a trial close. It assumes they want one of them, and they choose. So it's about getting the engagement. First, you introduce yourself, then you let them know what it's about. Then you do that with everybody, so no one's left out. Then you go around and you say, "Oh, which do you prefer?" And they give you an answer, and you go, "Oh dear, 6 of the other beds want that as well." Because basically, what I'd do was I'd have a competition every week, and it was basically based on the idea that I kidnapped an animal and was holding it hostage in the studio. So we had sheep in the sheets, wolf in the walls, elephant with an ECG, donkey on diamorphine. I'm sure there was something else as well. But basically, they had to phone up and do those animal impressions on air, because only when they phoned did I know that they were listening. And it's called an appointment to listen. So I'd hype them up. And then the third round, what I'd do is I'd speak to the child. I'd go, "Listen, I just want to speak to your mum or your dad, just to the side. I'll bring them back in a second. Is that okay?" They go, "Yeah, sure." And then what I do is I get the parents, had a little recorder, and because of the anxiety of the parent, they don't communicate how proud, how happy, how much they love. It's worry. So I'd record them saying something beautiful to their child, and that changed their perspective. And then I put that into the system and play it out during the show. So this show, I used to listen to heavy metal, wearing an Iron Maiden t-shirt, but now I listen to electronic dance music. There's a guy called Christopher Lawrence, and it's like a dun, 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 dun. So you'd have all these other shows on this hospital radio with people going, "Oh yes, hello, and this is record by," and then there's me going, dun, 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 and I had a crowd sound effect, so it went, "Ah!" I go, "Good evening," ah! And it honestly, it was. So we did this show at 9 o'clock at night on a Sunday night in a children's ward. They fucking stayed attention. They paid attention. They interacted. Sometimes I get 12 phone calls from a 16-bed ward. Now that's what I measure. So to do all of that, I cut out comedy clips, I scripted the intro, I sorted out team dynamics, all this sort of stuff. That took my attention away from feeling sorry about myself, focusing on the pain, taking loads of drugs to try and get away from it, because I was working on behalf of someone that I felt worse for, because at least I was on a motorbike. That was my choice. You have a bent back or a cancer and you're 9, I need to get a fucking sense of perspective, basically. And that saved me, because sooner or later I would have died.
So isn't that interesting? So after that accident, you had all of this, like, obviously living with all this pain, looking for these different escapes to kind of put yourself somewhere else mentally and not understand like where you're at. You wanted to escape that.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you tried just about everything under the sun.
Yeah.
Nothing worked.
No.
But then through providing your like energy to somebody else who did not have like the choice, like you said, you had the choice, you were on the motorcycle, they didn't, they were in the bed, they were born with it, whatever. That's when you really found your escape. That's when you really were able to start, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but living your life again, it sounds like.
Well, the thing was, I'd been trained in neuro-linguistic programming the 3 years prior. So in the middle of the drug and alcohol abuse, I trained in NLP for my job at Yellow Pages. And NLP is about modeling, but it's about, sorry, I'm having a pain twinge at the moment. It's about state. So I did not recognize in myself what everyone has always recognized about me, that I give off this. And I thought I was making the children happy because that was what happened. But no, the children are happy anyway. All they need is someone to reflect off, and the joy rises. And it's the feeling of elation that at 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday night, I'd go to the person who'd won the competition. "Hang on, we'll be up with you by 10:15. and would take the prize straight up to them, and they'd still be there waiting. And just I have actually got a tape, but I won't put it on this. But I've got an example of the show, and it's just crazy, crazy shares. It was very fulfilling. I spend my own money on the prizes. I spend my own time cutting out comedy clips. I'd write the script. I'd go up and volunteer. So volunteering typically 3 hours on a Sunday night. And yeah, they saved my life because they gave me purpose.
How crazy is that? So finding like, I just think that's really cool because you had like all these different ways of escaping, and it ultimately ended up that the most effective thing for you wasn't only free, but you were actually giving like your time for it. You were
Yeah.
giving something, you were putting something in, focusing on that. And now with NLP and that kind of stuff, you mentioned something earlier about like the beats, the music, stuff like that. I want to fast forward, kind of go on to what you've been doing with that, like why that's important. We've talked like once about NLP before, but I really want to hear your professional take on it as well.
So basically, I learn NLP, and when you learn anything, you have what's called conscious incompetence, conscious competence. Now I can't remember actually. There's 4 levels where you don't know what you don't know. You know what you know, but you're still trying. You're succeeding, but you still are aware of it, and then you're succeeding doing the thing automatically, unconsciously. And as it turns out, I have a particular type of brain. I took this information in specifically. Perspectives. So taking it's called perceptual positions. So you might take the position of the person you're talking to and a position of a fly on the wall to gain more insight into the communication process. But that requires you to imagine other people's perspectives. And I now realize that's the thing that other people find difficult. So loads of people get trained in all these things, or they go to a Tony Robbins seminar or something like that. I saw an Oprah show with Tony Robbins. He uses NLP, but he's rebranded it for his own thing. I saw the seminar, and from that seminar, I created something by watching it twice. Whereas I know people that will pay $5,000 a ticket and go and see him every year that he's doing his thing because he's their high. So they're not actually learning from it. So fast forward a couple of things, right? So basically, NLP in a professional context allowed me to communicate change. I was in a department called change management, and so operations, IT, all these other departments, people don't like change. I ironically had been forced into a position of change in my own personal life, and then I was seconded, so short-term contract into this department, and started using NLP to help with the communication. And there's a book called NLP at Work, and it covers it all, and I've read it all a couple of times, and you read it and you forget it, so it becomes natural. And that was what was happening in the hospital radio. But we'll have to fast forward, and we'll be here all night. So 2003, I fell over and broke this wrist. So I've only got one arm. I fell over and broke this wrist, and as I fell backwards, can you see that scar?
Yeah.
So that is because I went to hospital. They set it in a little plaster cast about this long over the wrist and the hand. The following day, I'm trying to eat a sandwich. It goes breaks again. So they had to put me under general anesthetic, manipulate the arm, and I had a cast from my fingertip to my elbow with my hand like that for 12 weeks. And that traps the medium nerve, the nerve associated with RSI. And so I can't now feel the tips of my fingers. And I had to have surgery at that Royal National Orthopaedic to get my hand to work again. Nearly lost that hand. That would have been bad. And then Christmas Eve that year, my mum dies suddenly, medical negligence. And then in the following 3 years, I had 5 TIAs, mini strokes, 2 of them when I was driving, and I had an experience where you had one vision there and one for each eyeball, and I had to close one eye to get home. But I'm 35 at the time, so you don't think it's going to be a stroke. So I didn't bother to even go to the doctor until the 5th one, when I started limping. And because I lived so far away, so I moved closer to the office, and I kept my doctor back at where I was born and brought up. And so to get an emergency appointment, my dad had to come down and collect me because I couldn't drive because my right leg didn't work. But by the time I got to my appointment, it's starting to work again. Booked me in for MRI just to be safe. 3 days before the MRI, I'm walking out of the house to do a hospital radio show with Motley Crue's Dr. Feelgood under my arm on the drive. I'm like, now I don't know how long I was there, but at some point I managed to drag myself up the step, over the step, and over the front door, over the lip of the door of my house, and um, I am very reliable. I think it's fair to say. So my mobile phone was on the settee of the couch because I'm not really a mobile person, but the two speed dials were the hospital radio station and my dad. And I phoned the hospital radio station, and I thought what I said to them was, I'm feeling a bit tired, I'm not coming in tonight. What I actually said was, luckily they went, fuck, he's having a stroke. Then I phoned my dad and said, yeah, I'm feeling a bit tired. I think I'm going to go to bed. But actually what I said was, and then I tried to get into the toilet, and I'm sweating. And if you've seen cows with BSE when they just can't, flailing all over the place, so I never got back up on my feet. And I'm trying to go to the toilet, and I'm sweating, and just I'm screaming out. And the front door had to be broken in by the police to rescue me. They take me to hospital. It's a Friday night, so the consultants aren't there. So for 3 days, I didn't know what it was. So I couldn't see, I couldn't stand, I couldn't talk, couldn't smell. Rushing blood through my ears, which made hearing difficult, and I also lost my sense of taste. So basically, there's an area at the base of your brain called the pons, which is where the spinal column slots into the bottom of the brain, and it's called the information superhighway. So all signals go across the pons, even ones for like the eyes and the nose, even things in your head go through this point in your spinal column to be centrally fed back. So I had it's my right side body. I had a left side pons stroke. And basically, after a couple of months in the hospital, they did an angiogram where they stick the camera through your arteries. And you've got two arteries at the back of your neck called the vertebral arteries. They come up like this, they join in the middle, and they feed into the base of the brain for your autonomic breathing and heart functions. So each of the 5 mini strokes, I'd sort of temporarily died and then come back again because the heart and lungs stopped. And then the only reason I'm not dead is because I had the 5 mini strokes, and on the angiogram it shows this complete blockage. And like, so an artery is like that. I'd grown these 2 little blood vessels like that around the blockage, and that's why I'm not dead. But if I laugh too hard, or when I've been swimming, so I'm at a different elevation, when I stand up, I get dizzy.
So that's interesting. Now, within all that, though, what do you, because I know you're working on a few different things now, like how is what you're doing now, how is that connecting like to your entire life before? Like, why do you feel so passionately about what you're doing now? And what does that look like for people who don't know yet?
Yeah, so basically, I thought I was going to die. They said we can't do anything for you. There's a stent, there's an operation they do if there's a blockage. Couldn't do that. There's nothing they can do. So, and the guy came into the room going, "I've never seen this on someone alive before." So, got out of hospital, paid for my funeral, gave away anything that had been in my cupboards for more than 5 years untouched to the hospice. Gave the hospital a load of clothes because people with strokes come in without clothes. Gave away loads of stuff, and because I'd been planning, once I realised that I was a goner, I was working out how much death taxes my family would have to pay because I had compensation for the accident. I owned my own house at the time, and they would have had to pay about $140,000 in death taxes, and they couldn't afford that. So I'm trying to offset this money. I didn't want to hide. I'm not a hide it under the covers type thing. Anyway, so I'm ready to die, but I'm not ready to give up. So I get walked back to my dad's house after I come out of hospital, and it's a 3-floor townhouse, and my old bedroom was on the top floor. And my dad said, "Oh, we'll get you a bed down here." And I said to him, "How am I going to learn to walk upstairs if I don't walk upstairs?" So for the next 3 months, I'd struggle up these stairs, lifting my right leg on, shaking as it came down. And I didn't fall down all of them, but I fell down one flight at least 3 times because the muscle in the right leg just I had to I couldn't get into it, but I couldn't lift it more than a couple of inches off the floor. So I was dragging it forwards and then standing on it and go like that. So ready to die, but I thought, right, fuck this. I'm gonna join the gym next to the flat I got bought that was closer to my dad's. Join this gym, even though I can't speak properly at the time. I'm like, oh yeah, I can't. That's how I was talking to this guy. He goes, "Oh, you should volunteer in primary school. There are no men in primary education, or few men in primary education." And I went like, well, I'm fucking dead in a week, so I'll do that. And I filled out all the application forms, contacted the coordinator, and the following Monday I was in volunteering as a classroom assistant. Now, I was only physically able to do half a day a week because at that time I was going to the gym 3 times a week. And I was just weak, weak, weak. And I would pass out like this. But when you're in a room of children of 7, they're on you. So you can't be passing out. So the need to stay alert built resilience. And this is where it starts to get weird. So I see things like other people, and then I have a whole load of other things that happen inside my head to represent what I'm looking at. And most of them have nothing to do with what we would generally agree we're looking at. Um, so when children are happy and giggling and laughing, they literally glow. I see them, but we talk about the light in children. So I guess I'm just imagining it, but they glow, and it's a blinding white light, and they'd be glowing and really happy, and the teacher go, "Rah! Sit down, face the front," and they go, and I'm sitting in the corner of the classroom going, "Why are you turning the lights off? Do you not understand? Why are you doing this?" So I did that for a while, volunteered at special needs education, autistic children, non-verbal, and it's now that that I learned in NLP really start to pay rewards, because non-verbal, with autism, the children have quite pronounced things, so shaking around from side to side, or it's difficult when you can't speak but you're 8 or 9, because clearly you're going to get frustrated. But if you actually pay attention to these children, you can notice all sorts of things. So there was one girl called Poppy who was physically independent but totally tuned out, like staring up into mid-space like that, totally isolated from other people. So NLP 101, build rapport. So the first day I'm there, I'm out in the playground at lunchtime, and she is rocking against the fence. So I go down maybe 10 meters away, kneel down so I'm the same height as her, and rocked against the fence. And she turned round and looked me dead in the eye. Then she came over and she hugged me, and she wouldn't let go of me for 5 minutes. And everyone's going, "Oh, Poppy doesn't do this, and she doesn't like that, and she doesn't like this, and she doesn't like that," and la 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 la. And everything that people tell me simply isn't for me, as it was with hospital radio, as it was with the fact I should be dead, as it was with my strokes, as it is with my relationship with children. So I went through these various volunteering experiences. The school I was at first paid for me to become a teaching assistant, which I'm professionally qualified in. I met a woman in 49 years, I've only been in relationships for a total of 2 years in total, and each of those relationships were 12 or more years apart. Because I never bonded. So although I can look at a woman and think, yeah, I think you're fanciable, the idea of all the stuff that you do apart from the sex bit is like, why do I want to do that? unless you're bringing something extra to the party. So anyway, but this woman was a PhD, is a PhD, and has a law degree. Works as a technology transfer director for a medical university. So Pfizer and what's the blue pill, Viagra. That Viagra was being made as a blood thinner, I think. And the erection effect was discovered, and then it was repackaged. That's the role she did. So, wow, I'm thinking, wow. Brief story: I was about to go on a 2-month holiday because I wasn't working, and she flew out to Australia flew for 3 days to see me for 4 days. So naturally, I offered to marry her because no one had ever shown me that comparison before. Didn't work out for various reasons. We'll speak about another time. So that was 6 months out of my volunteering in schools because I put my full attention on the thing I'm doing. Didn't work out, so I went back to the schools. Went back, and it was the deputy head teacher was the volunteer manager. She was under a great deal of pressure and screaming at children. And I made a mistake because as a volunteer, you're not allowed to be alone with children. And my function was to help children read. And if you know about self-belief and you know about state and you have empathy, you can tell a child or a person is not up for it. And there were these two kids, black kids without fathers, all the stereotypes. And it took me 3 or 4 weeks to get them to look at me in the eye and just smile, to converse. And I took them outside to deal with their belief systems with physical things. So one was doing a keep you up with a ball, and one was swinging across bars. And I got them just to breathe, to center themselves, and to visualize. And they both doubled their performance in the moment. So 40-second intervention, and they doubled what they could do. And they looked at me and I said, "That's how it works, mate. You decide what you want, and it happens." And it happens better and better and better the more you think about it. And it left a big. But then the deputy head teacher come down and said, "Why are you? Where's your reading books?" At the boys, I'm going, "Fuck it hell." And then she started screaming at me. Now I don't care because I have this mind where you could be screaming your head off at me, and all I'm seeing is a cartoon version of you making a stupid noise because I run these different visualizations internally real time. So she screams blah blah blah, and I went to the head teacher, who was the bloke I met in the jacuzzi, went fuck this, and I was hugely furious. I went back, sat in the gym in the steam room for a couple of hours, and then thought about a way for children to defend themselves. So I reasoned that I've got over various things in life. I am using my brain to do it. If I can find out how I do it, I can give the children that knowledge. So, because I'm recovering from stroke, I'm aware of rebuilding my consciousness. So, like for 3 years, I couldn't walk and talk at the same time. Because of the amount of neurological concentration. So I was building up my brain, reading books. There's a therapy, high pressure, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. There's various foods, cumin, broccoli, things like all these things, omega-3 oils. So I was doing everything to ramp up my cognitive performance for my own sake. But then I realized that, all these things I'm doing, which involved NLP, could help the children. So I'm rebuilding my brain. I've seen the Anthony Robbins thing. So I think, if I can think of a way of turning that into child-friendly stuff, I can give them an anchor which they feel good about. So basically, I designed this thing using this rumbling trance music, cleared all the dust out of the classroom, and so I get the kids to run into the session, scream and and there was loud music and bouncing around so basically, here's the thing. So primary age children, their brain waves operate predominantly on delta waves. It's the same signal as adults when we're asleep, so they're an open book. The trouble is that the way they teach, you get barriers to learning. So they put up the barriers because it's not fun, it's disciplined, it's just not a fun environment. Whereas what I was doing was creating a fun environment so I could teach them. And the teaching was never specific. It was always about frames of reference, visual illusions, psychology, neuroplasticity, neural associative uh, tapping, basically. And I created all this stuff, and I was giving my time, still volunteering, because I'm running through the last of my savings at this point, and so volunteering, and I volunteered in 18 schools. Only the last 2 schools did I do in the school every day for 8 weeks. All the others up till then had been 1 hour a week. And it was only when I was in the schools that I got to see the true nature of the problem. And the problem is basically the adults. And so there are many things involved, but basically I created this program and I wrote a book about it, which is this one here. Children Spectacularly Want More Adults. And that is me on the front cover, aren't I lovely? And basically that's 400,000 words. And what it basically says is this: if you're not an asshole to children, they can do amazing things. But the way that I arrived at that was I saw this thing called ability. They'd say, on the basis of a test, a standard test like you have in America, at the age of 5, they would say, oh, that's your ability, that's your ability, and that's your ability. And then they'd position the children around the room on their perceived abilities and talk to them as they felt appropriate. The trouble is there's a thing called growth mindset. So if you tell a child something as a fixed mindset feedback, they believe that they can't do any better. And that's what we do in the entire education system. And I was getting further and further away from education. The children loved it, the adults hated me. I didn't understand why. Then, because I'd written it down in this book, early on in the book, I go, yeah, it's like having 6 or 9 spheres of perception. Because I'd become aware that what I did in my head was I had these different views. And it wasn't until I came out of that final school and started volunteering. After a year of not helping a child, I went to a secondary special educational needs school, and these kids were branded as behavioral problems, but they clearly couldn't read and write. And so there's a woman I was constantly connected with who teaches children with dyslexia and dyscalculia how to spell and how to do maths. So I contacted her, spoke to her. She said, buy my book. I bought her book, Bridges to Success. And in her book, there are various statements from patients, clients she dealt with. And they say, yeah, I see the world in multiple perspectives. And I went, oh! Then I remembered that I'd failed English. I couldn't spell, punctuate, do grammar or anything. But in my age, you were just stupid. You were put in a low set. So I'll just quickly read some. Sorry about the time, but it's just, it's quite a lot to unpack.
Go on. No, this is good.
So there's a book called The Gift of Dyslexia, and I didn't read this until last year, but this captures exactly it. The mental function that causes dyslexia is a gift in the truest sense of the word, a natural ability, a talent. It is something special that enhances the individual. Dyslexics don't all develop the same gifts, but they do have certain mental functions in common. Here are the basic abilities all dyslexics share. They can utilize the brain's ability to alter and create perceptions. The spinning spheres are nothing more than an emergent property of dyslexia. They are highly aware of the environment. They're more curious than average. They think mainly in pictures instead of words. They're highly intuitive and insightful. They think and perceive multidimensionally, using all the senses. They can experience thought as reality, and they have vivid imaginations. So I read that and I go, fucking hell, that is me to a T. And that's why it is that people are so threatened by me. Because, and here's what it took me 18 months, and for something to take me 18 months is heavy contemplation. I had to figure out what it must be like if you have one perspective. So for me, I've got up to 15 that I can hold constantly, and theoretically I can take as many as I want. But for me, if I say blah, 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 and you say, I don't go, ah, I go, ooh, and I step into that perspective. Because for me, truth is the combination of all the different perspectives, because religions, self-helps, all these different things that exist in the world, they're insights that people have had to truth, whether there's a higher power, whatever it is, and they basically all say the same sort of thing but from their own perspective. So I figured out that that was why I hadn't worked. So I was not working. I had no money. I'd spent all my money. I hadn't died. So I'm now on benefits in the UK. So disabled benefit is what I live on. And I had to get the money to pay to publish that book myself, because no one would, no, it's not for people to read. It's when you publish it and get an ISBN number, they take a copy and put it in the British Library. So that's why I did it, to write down all the experiments I'd done and what I found out. And the last section of the book is called A Treatise on the Evolution of Human Consciousness. And it's like 20 techniques that exist in various, PhD studies as to how you can beat the word ability. So any one of them, 100%, 200% improvement. And what I do, I have this thing called recombinative innovation, which I read about in a book by Matthew Syed called Rebel Ideas. iPhone, recombinative innovation. The phone is just a phone. Then it was a music player, but iPhone came along, video, browser, camera, searchlight, music, texting, all that sort. That is an example of someone taking lots and lots of disparate things and making them one thing. That's what I've been doing all my life. So I joined this company to sell websites, to pay to get this book published, and I bless people, but my approach to anything is so different from the majority that it genuinely frightens them. So I say to them, what is it you want to achieve? And then my brain can create 15 real-time different variations of a plan. And because it's visual thinking, I construct metaphors inside my mind for solutions to the problems. In the past, it had just been me. Now I've got copywriters, app designers, web designers, personal coaches, all these sort of stuff around me. So I start networking with them in an attempt to try and get people to be serious about their marketing. Couldn't do it. So I thought, sod this. Then COVID-19 happened. And so we were locked down in the UK from the something of March. I was at a Testament gig on the 6th of March. I think it was the end of March in the UK. So I have earned a little bit of money, commission, but not enough. It was beautiful sunny weather in March 2020. I had a heat wave in the UK. I lay on my balcony eating ice creams for 6 months, didn't do anything. Then a guy I'd gone to school with sought me out. I told him about the book. I said, oh, no one's going to read it. He goes, oh, my dad will read it. He's an ex-teacher. And I sent him an electronic copy. And he goes, this book's really good. And I'm like, really? So I thought, oh, I better finish it and do it. So I finished the book. And then essentially, sorry that length of this, essentially I am cause motivated. So both in the program for children coaching and in the hospital radio, I wanted them to have this strength, this joy, this lift, this light that they are naturally. And I was unable to complete it in primary education, predominantly for 3 fatal reasons. The first reason I failed in primary education was I did not know until after the event how differently my brain operated from other brains. So I'm neurodivergent. I gave myself away, and therefore I was not valued, and I was doing it all on my own. So those 3 flaws are the reason why it didn't work. But so I ran over 3,000 experiments with children, so coached 680 children in 18 schools, and the same child on a different day is a different experiment. You're doing loads and loads of things to get the engagement. And all that stuff was why I wrote the book. But then I thought, oh, and someone basically, I'm a feminist. There are a few books, A Vindication of the Rights of Womanhood, Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, um, various things which talk about the difficulty girls have breaking into various sectors. So in the UK, in politics, in Parliament, at the current rate, for women and men to be equally balanced as they are in society will take another 250 years. In the UK, the highest percentage of female representation is in entrepreneurship, but which is 34%. But for every pound invested in the UK, women get 7p or 7 cents. So there's a real problem with gender equality. And all of the wishing and wanting and hoping doesn't change things. What changes things is when you produce a result that's so massive that it forces people to sit up and pay attention. So I think, right, well, I know that I've been able to rebuild my brain, which is neuroplasticity. I know all these techniques I've researched and found for developing abilities beyond what people can conceive of create what's called intrinsic motivation. So the children would do a thing not because they were told to, but because they were invited to. So, quick example: so the last two schools I was in, I challenged the children to not play computer games during half term. The first school I did it in, I only thought of the idea on the Wednesday before the Friday, and so I got 10% of two year six classes with letters from parents to confirm. The next school I went into, I had time to plan it, so I got 35%. So I went from 10% to 35%. So the rate of my improvement is unimpeded by linear progression, which is what most people do. I bounce over things because I acquire the knowledge and go for it. So the Potency.world is, I want £6.5 billion. I'm going to build 5 foundations in 5 countries around the world. These foundations will be like a Harvard campus or a Cambridge campus, so numerous buildings, shops, utilities, all that sort of stuff, but within a secured area. Because so there's been stories in the UK, I'm sure the same in the US, of sexual abuse in schools. There was a website set up here called Everyone's Invited by a Woman, and within a week they had 10,000 anonymous survivor stories of sexual abuse. It was on the news, on the BBC News, that of 5,000 reports of sexual inappropriate behaviour, 2,000 of those, both the perpetrator and the victim were below 10. So the shit that's going wrong with this species is happening to us at a very early age. And there's a TED talk I refer to where they take boy babies and put them in pink romper suits and girl babies and put them in blue romper suits, then give them to adults to play with toys. The adults give them the gendered toy. The baby doesn't care. So we are doing it to ourselves, but we can't see ourselves doing it because we only have our own experience. So the only way that I see to move the needle is to create an effect whereby not only do girls have a totally different learning experience, but it makes them neurodivergent as its design purpose. Because so we were talking before we started recording, Steve Jobs was adopted as well, and also dyslexic. Microsoft guy Bill Gates, dyslexic. Richard Branson, dyslexic. Elon Musk, Asperger's. Amazon guy Bezos, autistic. And there's loads of books I've read. Every big paradigm shift in human society comes from brains like the brain I've got and like the brain you've got. We have a load more processing going on inside than the external world gives, and that's why that list of being highly sensitive and intuitive. All it is I'm paying attention. So I paid attention to this girl Poppy and got a totally different result than any other adult. Not because I'm special, just because I'm paying attention. So the 5 foundations will be boarded school if they choose. The idea being that what we're going to do is set up these all female foundations. They'll have female security guards. There won't be a man anywhere near them, because half a woman's brain is taken up with threat detection all day, every day. It's like, cheer up, love, I'll give swallow, whatever it is. From about the age of 10, most girls experience this, and it becomes a background noise where they're always thinking about it. So speak to a woman and say, oh, should we go jogging tonight? She won't. Most women won't go out at night. They don't do this. They have their keys in their hand. They're always on the defense, because from as early as they could be aware of being feminine, they've been under threat, or they've been assaulted, or they've been attacked, or they've been sexualized in some other way. And so you take away that shit, you free up the brain, and then what you do is, and what the intention is, no lessons, no subjects, learning things that you put in your brain so you can answer an exam question. That's no good. I'm reading a book at the moment called Noise, and essentially doctors, lawyers, accountants, any knowledge sphere, any superior occupation that we look at and go, ooh, that requires your human brain, we're done. The only way that people will become not part of the consumer group is if they're part of the creator group. So what there'll be is there'll be coaches and facilitators. And if an 11-year-old girl in London, or a team of 11-year-olds in London, want to collaborate with another potency team in, say, South Africa, 11-year-olds can collaborate with 18-year-olds for a project that's going to affect Antarctica. And what you do is you say, what is it you want to do? What do you want to be? And then you have a broadcasting company which continuously shows positive imagery which shows women sweating, getting out of breath, failing, getting up, being victimized, or what have you, all this sort of stuff. So that rather than the really toxic narrative that we have at the moment, you've got your Real Housewives shows with these puffed up lips and all that crap. We've got reality TV shows. Basically, women in the media are either in their pants dancing around, ridiculously and horrifically plastic surgerized, praised for being a bimbo, or written off for being a dork. And they're kind of like the four categories that will let women be. Well, with this environment, they'll come out at 18 with brain function, which is collaborative by nature, which is growth set by design, growth mindset by design. So if I don't achieve it this time, what do I need to change to get a better result? That, and tapping into intrinsic motivation. So rather than saying we're going to teach you maths or this, what are you interested in? I'm interested in this, but I need this to do that to do this. You go, okay, well, here's a source, let me coach you, here's a mentor. And they find out what they need to find out to get to what they want to get to do. Because that doesn't require discipline or orders or anything. What it requires is kindness, focus, and help. And you do that rather than trying to condition brains into little boxes. And what you get is you get liberated brains that will come out into the workplace. And so the pitch is basically, yes, £6.5 billion for a 10-year project. And at the end of that 10-year project, we will graduate 500,000 girls with this brain function, and you get to employ them first. So by going with one investor company, the difference to their bottom line, so mixed teams generate 41% more revenue, that alone would change the company's fortune. But the fact they're going to come in with all these great ideas is going to create such a noise that every other company is going to go, shit, and then it will explode.
I love it.
That's the shortest version I think I've done.
And no, I love it. I mean, Jonathan, I want to thank you for making my job easy here. I just kind of got to learn again. And how cool is that, though? I love the idea. I think that's so unique and so obviously thought through so many different angles that I'm going to be looking out very close. If people want to reach out to you, if people want to contribute, if people want to learn more, where can they find you at?
So on LinkedIn at Potency.world, and also on LinkedIn, my profile is Potency-world, and they can find my LinkedIn profile. And basically, I'm looking for followers of the page because investors will look at that. And what the page does is when they follow it, there's videos about what children say about each other. There's videos about incredible examples of women throughout history and blah, blah, blah. It's empowering. It's affirming. It's potency as a synonym for empowerment because we thought empowerment had been overused. That's why it's called potency.
So Potency-world
is
on
my personal
LinkedIn.
profile, and Potency.world is the business page.
And you want the hyphen to be followed, correct? That's the one.
No, the dot.
The dot. Okay,
yeah,
perfect.
The business page.
Too easy. Yeah. So guys, you know what to do. Those links will be down below. As always, go ahead, give him a follow. Reach out to Jonathan as well because he's a class act. You'll have a talk with him and you'll be extremely happy that you did in that same boat. So Jonathan, proud of my heart, brother. I appreciate you coming on today. And I'm really happy we got to spend some time together.
And anyone watching, next time, because you know about me now, next time I'll shut up and you can talk. So yeah, we'll go for that. No. Do you want a quick joke before I leave or before you stop recording? Okay, so my female friend wouldn't believe me when I told her I bought a new car made out of spaghetti until I drove it past her.
On that note,
yes, stop recording.